Today, we are going to discuss the learning outcome, understand the organizational imperative for the proactive implementation of system security. Over this session, we will look at what a security attack really costs an organization across finance, reputation, the law and regulation, and then at the policies and procedures that keep those threats at bay. By the end, you will see why acting before an attack always beats scrambling to recover after one. Let me set out where we are heading. In the first half, we will unpack why an organization must analyze the implications of an attack, from the financial and economic hit-through to the reputational, legal, and regulatory fallout, meeting the common attack types along the way. In the second half, we turn to defense, looking at the policies and procedures a business needs and how technology, process, and people have to work together to bring risk down. Keep that pairing in mind throughout. First, understand the damage, then build the protection. The foundation of everything in information security is the CIA triad, 3 simple goals that guide how we protect data. Confidentiality means only authorized people can see information. Integrity means the data stays accurate and unaltered. And availability means the systems are there when you actually need them. Any attack tends to strike at one or more of these. So data stolen breaks confidentiality, data corrupted breaks integrity, and a system knocked offline breaks availability. The key distinction to hold on to is between proactive security, which lowers the likelihood and impact before anything happens, and reactive security, which only kicks in once the damage is already done. It helps to know your enemy, so let me run through the attacks organizations most often face. Phishing uses deceptive emails or messages to trick someone into handing over data or access. Ransomware encrypts your files and demands payment to release them. And malware, more broadly, is any malicious software that damages or infiltrates a system. Then there is distributed denial of service, which floods a system with traffic until it collapses. The insider threat, where an employee or contractor misuses their access, and social engineering, which manipulates people rather than machines. Recognizing these types is the first step to analyzing how much damage each of them could really do. Let's talk money, because an attack hits the balance sheet in more ways than people expect. There are direct costs straight away, bringing in incident responders and forensic investigators, rebuilding and restoring IT systems, and where ransomware is involved, potentially the ransom itself. Then the ongoing costs pile up, downtime and lost productivity, the expense of notifying every affected customer, and higher cybersecurity insurance premiums the following year. A crucial point is that these costs escalate the longer an attack goes undetected, and a smaller organization may simply not have the reserves to absorb them. Beyond those immediate bills, an attack damages the organization's wider economic position. While systems are down, revenue is lost, and resources that should be driving the business forward get diverted into recovery, so competitiveness quietly slips. Projects are delayed, investment decisions are put on hold, and for a listed company, the share price and investor confidence can take a real knock. Suppliers and partners may even revisit their commercial terms, and every pound spent on recovery is a pound not spent on growth and innovation. Reputation is one of the hardest things to rebuild once it has been damaged. Trust sits at the heart of every customer and partner relationship, so a breach can drive existing customers away and make it far harder to win new ones, particularly when the story lands in the media and spreads across social media. What makes reputational harm so serious is that it lingers long after the technical side is fixed. A publicly disclosed breach attracts scrutiny for years. It is difficult to put a precise figure on, but its impact is often greater than the direct costs. An attack also opens the door to legal risk that sits quite apart from the technical incident. The organization might find itself in breach of contract with customers or suppliers, facing liability claims from individuals whose data was exposed, and running up legal costs simply defending those disputes. Many contracts now contain explicit data protection or security clauses, and legal exposure grows sharply where negligence can be shown. This is exactly why serious incidents almost always need legal advice running in parallel with the technical response. In the UK, any breach involving personal data brings specific regulatory obligations under UK GDPR. Qualifying breaches must be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, generally without undue delay, and where individuals are at real risk, they may need to be told directly. The ICO has genuine teeth here. It can investigate, issue enforcement notices demanding corrective action, and impose significant fines for serious non-compliance. Regulatory action adds cost, scrutiny, and reputational exposure all at once, which is why a compliance failure so often triggers problems across every other category we have discussed. It is worth separating costs into two buckets because they behave very differently. Direct costs are the visible ones you can point to on an invoice: incident response and forensics, system restoration, any ransom or extortion payment, and regulatory fines. Indirect costs are subtler but often larger, things like lost customers and revenue, reputational damage, the drain on staff time and morale, and those higher insurance premiums. The lesson is that the headline figure for an attack rarely captures the full picture, because so much of the real cost is indirect. Let me make this concrete with an example. Picture a mid-sized organization hit by ransomware overnight, its finance and customer record systems suddenly encrypted. Financially, it has to engage incident responders and pay to rebuild the systems. Economically, order processing halts and sales are lost during the downtime. Reputationally, customers hear about it through the media. Legally, business partners begin raising concerns about contractual data obligations. And because personal data is involved, the incident has to be assessed for ICO notification. The takeaway is powerful. One single attack has created implications across all 5 categories at once. Before we move on, let me gather the key terms from this first half. The CIA triad, remember, is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the 3 goals of information security. Phishing is deceptive communication, designed to trick people into giving up data or access, while ransomware encrypts data and demands payment for its release. Distributed denial of service overwhelms a system to force an outage. An insider threat is the risk posed by employees or contractors misusing their access, and the ICO is the UK's regulator for data protection. And a data breach, simply put, is any incident that leads to unauthorized access, loss, or disclosure of data. Given all of those implications, the sensible response is to act proactively rather than wait and react. Policies are where that starts, because they set clear expectations for how people behave and how systems are used. The guiding principle here is defense in depth. You layer technical, procedural, and people-focused controls so you never rely on any single one, which means one failure won't automatically expose the whole organization. Proactive implementation is both more effective and far cheaper than than cleaning up after an attack. But a policy only works if it is communicated, understood, and genuinely enforced. At the top of the hierarchy sits the Information Security Policy, which sets the overall framework for protecting the organization's information assets. It typically spells out who is responsible for security, the standards for access control and data handling, and the requirements for reporting and responding to incidents. Think of it as the reference point that every other security policy hangs off. Good practice is to align it with a recognized standard, such as ISO 27001, and to give it senior management ownership with regular review, because a policy nobody revisits quickly goes stale. The acceptable use of IT policy comes down to a simple question. What are staff actually allowed to do with the organization's systems? It sets out the permitted and prohibited use of devices and the internet, the rules on installing software, and the consequences when someone steps over the line. Its real value is reducing the risk created by careless or unauthorized use, the everyday behavior that quietly opens holes in your defenses. It also gives the organization a clear basis for disciplinary action when the rules are broken. Email deserves its own policy because it is one of the most common routes an attacker will take. A good email policy tells staff how to spot and report suspicious or phishing messages, sets rules about sending sensitive data by email, and requires encryption where it is needed. Since phishing and malware so often arrive in the inbox, clear procedures here directly cut the success rate of email-based attacks. In effect, it turns every employee into a first line of defense rather than a weak point. The mobile device policy governs the organization's own phones and tablets, which travel well beyond the safety of the office. Typical controls include device encryption and password protection, the ability to remotely wipe a device that is lost or stolen, and restrictions on installing unauthorized apps. The point to grasp is that every mobile device extends the attack surface, giving an attacker more ways in. A solid policy keeps the risk from loss, theft, or compromise firmly under control. Bring your own device, or BYOD, is where staff use their personal phones and laptops for work, and it needs careful rules. A BYOD policy sets minimum security standards for those personal devices, insists on separating personal and organizational data, and defines the conditions under which a device may touch the network. The trade-off is real. BYOD adds flexibility and convenience, but it widens the range of devices the organization has to secure. The policy is where you balance that employee convenience against the risk to the business. The data protection policy is what underpins your compliance with UK GDPR and protects personal data right through its life cycle. It sets out the principles for lawful, fair processing, the rules for storing, accessing, and sharing data, and the procedure for handling requests from data subjects who want to see or correct their information. By getting this right, an organization directly reduces the regulatory implications we looked at earlier. It should always be read alongside the information security policy, since the two reinforce one another. Closely related is the information retention policy, which decides how long different kinds of information are actually kept. Its purpose is to avoid holding data longer than necessary, to support the data minimization requirement in UK GDPR, and to ensure secure disposal once a retention period ends. There is a neat security benefit here too. The less old data you hold, the less there is to steal if an attack succeeds. Of course, whatever data you do retain still has to be properly protected while it sits on your systems. New starters are a surprisingly common point of security risk, which is why induction matters so much. A good onboarding process introduces people to the security policies and expectations from the outset, trains them to recognize phishing and social engineering, and sets up their access on a least privilege basis, meaning they get only what their role actually requires. The aim is to build security awareness from an employee's very first day. Get this right, and you close off the risk created by untrained, unaware new staff before it ever becomes a problem. Onboarding is only the beginning, though, because threats keep evolving and awareness fades. Ongoing talent development keeps security thinking current through refresher training on policies and emerging threats, specialist training for those in IT and security roles, and simulated phishing exercises that safely test whether people really are staying alert. The reason this matters is simple. A single training session at induction is not enough when attackers change their tactics constantly. The goal is to embed security as part of continuous professional development, not a one-off, tick-box exercise. Now we get to where the written rules meet the actual machines through group policies. These are technical controls that translate policy into enforced system behavior. They can require password complexity and regular expiry, block the installation of unapproved software, and automatically lock devices left inactive. The beauty of this is that compliance no longer depends on every individual remembering to do the right thing. The system simply enforces it consistently, right across the organization. Group policies work hand in hand with written policy, though, and never replace the need for it. There is a world of difference between a policy on paper and a policy in practice. Without enforcement, the rules might exist, but are applied inconsistently. Staff are unaware of what is expected. There are no technical controls backing them up, and non-compliance simply slips by unnoticed. With enforcement, group policies apply the rules automatically. Induction embeds awareness from day one. Ongoing training keeps reinforcing expectations, and when someone does fall short, it is spotted and dealt with. The message is clear. A policy is only ever as good as the enforcement behind it. Let me show how all of this comes together with an example. An employee receives a phishing email asking for their login details, exactly the kind of attack we met earlier in this outcome. Thanks to the email policy and their training, they recognize the warning signs. The induction process had already taught them how to report a suspicious email, and following the acceptable use policy, they neither click the link nor reply. Even if they had entered their credentials, group policy password rules would limit the damage, and the information security policy ensures their report triggers the organization's incident process. The outcome is that layered policies and procedures stop a phishing email from ever becoming a breach. Let me pull together the key terms from this second half. An acceptable use policy governs how employees may use organizational IT systems, while BYOD refers to using personally owned devices for work. A group policy is a set of centrally managed technical settings enforced across the organization's systems. Data minimization means collecting and keeping only the personal data you actually need. Least privilege means giving users only the access their role demands. And defense in depth is that idea of layering multiple controls so no single failure causes a breach. Let's pause and check your understanding. Could you explain 3 different implications an organization might face after an information security attack and set out the difference between the direct and indirect costs involved? Could you say why UK GDPR creates regulatory implications for a data breach and describe the purpose of an acceptable use of IT policy? And finally, can you explain how induction and talent development reduce security risk, and how group policies support a written information security policy? Take a moment with those before we finish.